Sure.
How about this part of it, right? Because so let's assume, right? Let's say for the sake of this that you and I aren't part of that quote unquote patriarchy that is the ones that have like the top 1% or whatever that have really caused the problems.
Sure.
Is there still accountability or responsibility on us to say, yeah, maybe I'm not directly doing it, but
Mhm.
as a man, I could have spoken out more and said something about it, right? Like I could have and should have been doing more to that. And if I get too hung up on this idea that like, well, there's people out there that are falsely claiming all men are the problem, and I'm trying to like exclude myself from that. Maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe I'm
Right.
not the problem in that I did anything directly to a woman, but I
Mhm.
certainly didn't do enough to stop it from happening. How do you think
Sure.
about that piece of it?
I believe I have to challenge myself to be receptive.
Mm,
So if a woman has an issue, and let's say she says, "You're a part of the problem just by virtue of being a man," I have to, as much as my initial instinct might be to be defensive, I need to challenge myself to be receptive and say, well,
mm,
okay, that's how you feel. Let's hear it. I'm going to do my very best to objectively receive that. It's your experience. It's valid. So what I can do is I can provide a space, within the scope of my control to say, well, let's hear that.
mm,
You know,
mm,
what is the root of that? Why do you feel that way?
mm.
And hopefully I'll discover some things and she might discover some things.
Yeah, that's right. And that's an interesting thing too, because and again, I say this with full sensitivity to who I am and what goes on in the world, but like I'll go back to it. I get the reaction of a lot of people saying, like, if they see something that somebody could have been doing better, whether it be sexism, racism, whatever the thing is,
Sure.
that like wanting to demand of you to be better, maybe wanting to cancel you and say, like, hey, you should have been better, you didn't do it.
Right.
I get that. I get that reaction, but very much in the spirit of what you're saying, it would seem like the harder, maybe
Mhm.
seemingly less fair, but more logical reaction is to be like, let me help you understand. Like, let me help you be accountable. Let me
Sure.
help you figure out and be honest with yourself if there is an issue there. And I'll do the same. I'm going
Right.
to do the same and model it for you and try and be it.
Right.
It's much less like provocative and exciting on social media. It's like all that stuff's not as exciting. It doesn't feel as good in the moment because it feels good to yell at somebody and make them
Of
feel
course.
worse.
Of course.
I get all of that, but it would seem like what you're proposing is more likely going to get to the better outcome, maybe, right? Like, is that kind of where you go with
I
it?
would think so. I would think
Yeah.
so because at the very least, so for example, if someone is of that belief, they just see me as a man and that's it. So man equals enemy. I believe that's too simplistic. And if I were to say woman equals enemy or woman equals, victim, she's being a victim, she's this and that. If I have any negative connotation, if we don't have any dialogue, then we're in our echo chamber. There's no progress there.
Mm, mm.
So I
Yeah.
would say the progress would be you check your biases, which I think, like you said, even admitting that you have biases would be challenging, but that's a both sides have to engage in that, not just one. So I have to say, you know what, I could have some biases to where I'm automatically defensive. I'm not as receptive as I should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she might say, you know what, well, maybe because of past experiences, I, am looking, maybe that's the opposite of rose colored glasses, but my perspective says man equals enemy because
Yeah.
of my previous experiences. So we would both have to put forth a genuine effort to put aside our biases and hear one another.
Yeah, man. And you said it before too. You said something because what likely is going to happen in real life, right? Is what we're talking about kind of conceptually is you can run
Right.
into a situation where somebody does say like, fuck all men. Like I hate all of them. They're the worst.
Sure.
That ability for you to be like, hey, I'm not going to take that personal. I
Of course.
understand there's a reason why which you believe that.
Right.
Let me try and kind of explore that with you and understand it. You said something like that before of like let me understand how you got to that view, how you got to that belief. That's an
Mhm.
important part of the process because there's a lot of people that can go into this with the right intention of being like, hey, I want to be open-minded. I want to
Sure.
kind of understand the perspective. I want to hold myself accountable, hold them, do this all the right way. But as soon
Right.
as somebody hits you with something like that, like, no, 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 you're the worst, then it
Right.
feels like, well, now all bets are off. Now she's being
Of
unreasonable, or he's being unreasonable. I'll be unreasonable too, and everything falls apart. That
course.
ability to like take that first shot and be
Sure.
like, well, maybe let me look at it for what it is. That's hard because that gets back to that ego
Oh,
thing, trying to
of
protect
course.
us. Like,
Oh,
I don't want
definitely.
to believe there's something wrong with me, but
Of course.
genuinely looking at it.
Oh, it's challenging. It's not for the faint of heart. So to answer the original question, when you asked why not, I believe people realize it's like doing a plank. It's
Yeah,
easy to say, you know what, if you want to have a strong core, you should do planks. And I
yeah,
could say that with a smile, right? But 45 seconds into that plank, I might not be smiling anymore. So I
yeah.
believe that's how I would look at it. So
I love
challenge.
that example too because I would even go as far like just to stretch that out, like, so you're doing that plank at 45 seconds.
Right.
Your mind at some point is going to start telling you, like,
Right.
drop, like it's done. You cannot go another second more, which is just like your mind telling you in a moment of like, you're absolutely right. Be angry, yell at that person, like cancel them, destroy them. And
Of
when you're
course.
doing that plank, once you push through that, you can realize, oh, I can go longer than I even thought. Like my mind was lying to me. It told me I had to stop 20 seconds ago, but I didn't. So that
Exactly.
parallel works so beautifully.
Right. Right.
Mm,
Exactly. It's conditioning ourselves in that way, knowing that as far as, what do we ultimately want to do? What type of person am I looking to be?
yeah.
Do I want to just follow the herd? That's easy to do. That's easy to do. Find your favorite echo chamber, get comfortable, have your biases reinforced. That's easy to do. We see it all the time. I would say what's more challenging is to purposely say, you know what, I know how this might feel. I know
Mm,
it's easy to say, you know what you're saying has no basis whatsoever. I don't see it. It doesn't exist in my perspective,
mm.
and just leave it at that. But I'd say to challenge yourself to assume that you may have missed something or understand that somebody has something of value that they could add to you.
Mm, super hard to do.
Yeah.
And I'll say, like, I'm sure there's going to be people that listen to this that are like, hey, they don't get it. Like,
Hmm.
we women, feminist movement, just because we're talking about that topic, it could be others, is
Sure.
like, this is the only way. This is the best way. Like, it has to be a fight. It has to be a battle. And
Right.
that we have to practice what we preach and be like, maybe they're right. Maybe they're so maybe that movement is so um convicted and feel so strong about it because they feel like this is the only way. It's got to be a fight. And
Right.
I don't know. Maybe they're right.
Well, my question to anyone, and I always ask myself this and anyone, is it's about outcomes.
Mm,
So, okay, fair enough. It should be a fight. What has been the outcome of that?
mm.
Is it a desirable outcome? And then, okay, if you believe, well, it was just the other person's fault. Well, we know that we can't do a magic spell to control the other side of things. So, what can you do to obtain the outcome that you want?
I love the outcomes because I think you're so right about that. I think we need to look at our outcomes more. Let
Mm-hmm.
me play out that thread. So sorry, I'll go one more. You keep me
Oh,
intrigued,
please,
so I'm gonna go a little more.
please do.
So what about that woman that's like, but look at what you're telling me though, right? Like
Yeah,
for however long of history, women have been mistreated, right? There was a time period in which you could more or less just rape a woman if you wanted to, and there was no repercussion, right? You could do
sure.
whatever you wanted. They couldn't vote. They couldn't
Right.
have the jobs we had, like all sorts of different things. So that was terrible. Like that was no good.
Of course.
Now we're at this period and they're saying, all right, the only way to fix this is we've tried everything. We got to fight now. And the
Mhm.
response is like, well, look at the outcome. It's not, then it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like if I'm too passive, nothing changes.
Right.
If I fight, you're telling me I'm not going to get to a good outcome. Like where does that leave me?
I'm